But when she would get angry, she'd say, Eugene? And then I knew she was mad.
There was a time when Jeanne Kelly seemed almost larger than life. With a single smile and effortless step, he transformed dance into pure joy, making millions believe that happiness could be found beneath a rainy street lamp or inside a simple melody. Yet behind the graceful performances and Hollywood applause was a man who carried private disappointments, quiet regrets, and a heart that searched for something no audience could ever see. 3 wives shared different chapters of his remarkable journey. Countless admirers crossed his path, but only one woman truly understood the man after the cameras stopped rolling. Before Jeanne Kelly's final curtain fell, those closest to him revealed which love remained with him long after the music faded. The young woman who believed in him before the world did. Long before Jeanne Kelly became one of Hollywood's brightest stars, he was simply a determined young man from Pittsburgh with aching feet, endless ambition, and dreams that seemed far too large for the world around him. Success was uncertain. Money was scarce. The applause he would one day receive existed only in his imagination. During those uncertain years, one person believed in him before millions of strangers ever would. Her name was Betsy Blair. She was young, intelligent, and every bit as determined as Jeanne himself. Their connection formed not under dazzling studio lights, but during the difficult climb toward success, when neither could predict what tomorrow might bring. In 1941, they married, beginning a partnership built on hope rather than fame. When Jeanne left Broadway for Hollywood, Betsy followed with unwavering faith. She understood that every audition, every rehearsal, and every exhausting day brought him one step closer to the career he had dreamed about since childhood. While Jeanne chased opportunity, Betsy quietly became the steady foundation waiting for him at home. Then everything changed. For Me and My Gal introduced America to a remarkable new talent. Soon afterward came one successful musical after another. The young man, who had once worried about finding work, suddenly belonged to an entirely different world. One filled with premieres, studio executives, photographers, and endless demands. Success, however, often asks for a price. Jeanne immersed himself completely in his craft. Dance was never simply a profession, it became an obsession. He chased perfection with relentless discipline, spending countless hours rehearsing routines until every movement appeared effortless on screen. Friends later recalled that once Jeanne focused on a project, almost nothing else seemed to exist. For Betsy, the man she had married was still there, but Hollywood was slowly asking for more of him than any marriage could comfortably survive. Neither of them realized it then, but the very dream they had built together was quietly becoming the greatest challenge their love would ever face. The star who changed his life, but never stole his heart. By the early 1940s, Jeanne Kelly had arrived in Hollywood, but not everyone believed he belonged there. Unlike the polished leading men audiences were used to seeing, Jeanne looked different. He wasn't conventionally glamorous, and some studio executives questioned whether a Broadway dancer could ever become a movie star. His future seemed uncertain before it had truly begun. Then, one woman quietly changed everything. Her name was Judy Garland. Already one of MGM's biggest stars, Judy saw something that others overlooked. She recognized Jeanne's extraordinary talent and strongly supported his casting opposite her in For Me and My Gal in 1942. It was his first major motion picture, and without that opportunity, Hollywood history might have unfolded very differently. The chemistry between them was impossible to ignore. On screen, they danced with effortless charm, laughed with genuine warmth, and shared a natural connection that made audiences believe every moment. Before long, gossip columnists began whispering that perhaps their romance wasn't confined to the cameras. The rumors spread quickly. Were Hollywood's newest stars secretly in love? Neither Jeanne nor Judy ever confirmed those stories. In fact, throughout their lives, both described their relationship as one built on admiration, friendship, and professional respect. Judy gave Jeanne confidence when he needed it most, while Jeanne admired her unmatched talent and resilience during the pressures of studio life. Sometimes, however, friendship can appear so genuine that the world mistakes it for romance. Years later, Jeanne rarely spoke about the rumors themselves. Instead, he remembered Judy as the woman who opened a door when others wanted it closed. She had believed in him before audiences knew his name, and he never forgot that act of kindness. But gratitude and love are not always the same. As Jeanne's career soared to unimaginable heights, another woman quietly entered his life. Someone who understood not only the performer the world adored, but the restless perfectionist hidden behind Hollywood's brightest smile. She would eventually become the love story that defined the happiest years of his life. The love he found after heartbreak. By the late 1950s, Jeanne Kelly had everything Hollywood promised. He had become one of the world's most celebrated entertainers. His films were beloved across continents, and his name had become synonymous with elegance, innovation, and unforgettable musical storytelling. Yet behind the standing ovations, his personal life told a quieter, more complicated story. His marriage to Betsy Blair had gradually unraveled, ending in divorce in 1957. The separation was painful. They had shared years of struggle before success ever arrived, built a family together, and watched impossible dreams become reality. But Hollywood's relentless pace and Jeanne's unwavering devotion to his craft had slowly created a distance neither of them could overcome. By then, someone else had already become an important part of his professional life. Her name was Jeanne Coyne. A gifted dancer and choreographer, Jeanne had worked alongside Jeanne for years. She understood the exhausting rehearsals, the endless pursuit of perfection, and the pressure that came with creating films audiences would remember forever. Long before romance entered the picture, they had built a friendship rooted in mutual respect and artistic trust. Jeanne's own marriage had ended years earlier, while Jeanne remained committed to his family until his marriage to Betsy came to its conclusion. Throughout those years, Jeanne and Jeanne continued working together professionally, their friendship quietly deepening with time. Only after Jeanne's divorce did that friendship gradually grow into love. In 1960, they married. It wasn't the kind of romance that dominated Hollywood gossip columns. Instead, it was built on years of understanding, shared experiences, and a rare appreciation for one another's strengths and struggles. Friends noticed a change. Jeanne laughed more easily. Home became a refuge rather than another place to perfect his work. Together, Jeanne and Jeanne welcomed 2 children, creating a family life that many believed brought him his greatest sense of peace. Then tragedy struck. Jeanne was diagnosed with leukemia and passed away in 1973. Those closest to Jeanne said the loss left a wound that never fully healed. For a man who rarely revealed his deepest emotions, Jeanne's absence became one of the quiet sorrows he carried for the rest of his life. The woman who shared his final curtain call. For more than a decade after Jeanne Coyne's death, Jeanne Kelly lived with a silence few people ever noticed. He continued to receive Lifetime Achievement Awards. New generations discovered his classic films. Wherever he appeared, audiences greeted him as one of the last great legends of Hollywood's golden age. But when the applause faded, Jeanne returned to a much quieter life. Friends often remarked that he never stopped missing Jeanne. While he remained active professionally, there was a thoughtful, reflective quality about him that hadn't existed during his younger years. He had spent a lifetime perfecting movement on screen. Now, he was learning how to live without the woman who had brought balance to his private world. Then, quite unexpectedly, another chapter began. In 1985, Jeanne met Patricia Ward, a young writer researching his remarkable career. Their first conversations centered on dance, filmmaking, literature, and the creative process. Patricia wasn't interested in Hollywood gossip or celebrity headlines. She wanted to understand the artist behind the legend. That curiosity grew into a genuine friendship. Over time, friendship became companionship, and companionship gradually became love. When they married in 1990, Jeanne was 77 and Patricia was 30. Their 47-year age difference immediately drew public attention. Some people questioned the relationship without ever knowing the couple personally. Jeanne chose not to answer the criticism. Those who spent time with them described something entirely different, a relationship built on conversation, mutual respect, shared intellectual interests, and deep affection. Patricia encouraged Jeanne to look back on his extraordinary life with gratitude rather than regret, while Jeanne found comfort in someone who loved him not simply for the famous films, but for the thoughtful man behind them. As Jeanne's health slowly declined during the 1990s, Patricia remained at his side. After his passing in 1996, her devotion did not end. She dedicated herself to preserving every aspect of Jeanne Kelly's artistic legacy. Through books, lectures, exhibitions, documentaries, and the careful stewardship of his personal archives, Patricia ensured that future generations would remember not only Jeanne Kelly, the legendary entertainer, but also the private man she had the privilege of knowing. Yet one question still remained. When Jeanne reflected on the women who had shaped his life, which one had truly captured his heart forever? The women who admired the man behind the smile. To the public, Jeanne Kelly always looked fearless. Whether he was dancing through pouring rain or leading an elaborate musical number with effortless confidence, audiences saw a man who appeared completely in control. But the people who worked beside him knew another side of Jeanne. A side that was demanding, deeply disciplined, and driven by standards that few could match. No one spoke about that side more honestly than Debbie Reynolds. When the young actress was cast opposite Jeanne in Singin' in the Rain, she was only beginning her career and had almost no formal dance training. Jeanne expected excellence from everyone around him, especially himself. Rehearsals were long, physically exhausting, and emotionally draining. Years later, Debbie admitted there were days she went home in tears, yet she also acknowledged something equally important. Jeanne never demanded anything from others that he wasn't willing to demand from himself. Every movement, every camera angle, every expression mattered because he believed audiences deserved perfection. It was a philosophy that could be difficult to live with, but one that helped create some of the greatest musical films ever made. His longtime dance partner Sid Charisse understood that perfection perhaps better than anyone. Together, they created routines that still leave audiences speechless decades later. Their chemistry was so convincing that fans often wondered whether romance existed beyond the cameras. It never did. Instead, Sid remembered Jeanne as a brilliant creative partner whose greatest romance was always the work itself. That pattern repeated throughout his career. Leading ladies admired his talent. Friends respected his discipline. Collaborators trusted his artistic vision. But very few were ever allowed inside the emotional walls Jeanne carefully built around himself. He spent his life teaching audiences that dancing could express feelings words never could. And perhaps that was his greatest contradiction. The man who could communicate love with a single graceful step often struggled to speak openly about his own heart. As the years passed and Jeanne looked back on the women who had shaped his remarkable journey, one truth became impossible to ignore. Each had given him something unforgettable, but only one had remained with him, not merely in memory, but in the quiet place where love outlives applause. The woman he loved beyond the spotlight. As Jeanne Kelly entered the final chapter of his life, the standing ovations meant less than they once had. Awards filled the shelves. Classic films continued to delight new generations. His place in Hollywood history was secure. But when conversations turned from career to life, Jeanne's closest friends noticed something revealing. He rarely measured his happiness by box office success or glowing reviews. Instead, he spoke about the people who had walked beside him through triumph, disappointment, and loss. Each woman had shaped him in a different way. Betsy Blair had believed in an unknown young dreamer before the world ever applauded his name. Together they endured the uncertainty of those early years and built a family that would always remain part of his story. Judy Garland had opened an important door when Hollywood hesitated, offering friendship and confidence at a moment that changed his future forever. Patricia Ward Kelly brought comfort, companionship, and peace during his final years. She also became the devoted guardian of his legacy, ensuring that the artist Jeanne Kelly would never be forgotten. Yet when those who knew him best reflected on the love that transformed him most completely, one name appeared again and again: Jeanne Coyne. With Jeanne seemed to find something that had eluded him for years. Not excitement or publicity, but understanding. She knew the demanding artist behind the famous smile. She accepted the relentless perfectionist who could spend endless hours chasing a single, flawless moment. And for a time, she gave him a home where he no longer had to perform. Her death left a silence that friends said never truly disappeared. Jeanne continued living, creating, and inspiring, but the loss of Jene became one of the deepest sorrows of his private life. Perhaps that is the quiet truth hidden behind every great Hollywood legend. Some loves make headlines, others become history. But the greatest love is often the one that quietly changes who we are and remains in our hearts long after the curtain falls. Jeanne Kelly gave the world unforgettable songs, timeless dances, and moments of pure cinematic magic. Yet behind every graceful performance was a man searching for the same things we all hope to find: trust, companionship, and a love that could survive life's changing seasons. His story reminds us that even the brightest stars carry private joys and private heartbreaks, hidden far from the spotlight. If this journey brought back cherished memories of Hollywood's golden age, we'd love to hear from you. Which chapter of Jeanne Kelly's life touched you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy classic Hollywood stories told with care and respect, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for another unforgettable journey here on Legendary Archives.